This home battery has been called on by a power grid during an actual blackout emergency more than 24 times this year alone, and every single time it kept the lights on for tens of thousands of homes without a single power plant spinning up. It uses the exact same lithium iron phosphate chemistry that makes cobalt-based batteries look fragile by comparison. It's been installed in over 1 million homes across 6 continents, and its parent company was born out of a 2-week trial in a Delaware courtroom. 2 reverse fortune moments involving lawsuits, an acquisition worth $2.6 billion, and a battery bet so audacious that the man who made it promised to give the entire thing away for free if he lost. It's called the Tesla Powerwall. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how it works, where it's already reshaping entire power grids, and what it would actually cost you to get one. Let's dive in. Right now, the average American household pays around $163 a month for electricity, and that number has climbed roughly 26% in just the last 5 years. In states like Hawaii or Connecticut, you're looking at closer to $200 a month. So let's actually break down what that bill is buying you and why it keeps rising even as the grid is supposedly getting cleaner. Your utility generates power at massive centralized plants, pushes it through hundreds of miles of transmission lines, steps it down through substations, and finally delivers it to your meter. Every step in that chain costs money, and every step loses energy. By the time electricity actually reaches your home, somewhere between 5 and 7% of it has already disappeared as heat in the wires. You're paying for power that never arrived. Now maybe you've already got solar panels on your roof. On a sunny afternoon, they might generate more electricity than your house can use in that moment. In a sensible world, that surplus would just get stored for later or shared with someone who needs it right now. But in most states, that extra power gets pushed back into the grid at a small fraction of what you pay to pull power out. That's called net metering, and utilities across the country have been quietly gutting it for years. California's NEM 3.0 policy, enacted in 2023, slashed the value of exported solar power by roughly 75% in a single stroke. Nevada, Arizona, and Indiana have all pushed through similar cuts. Your panels still work exactly the same. The financial return for using them the way they were sold to you has been cut off at the knees. The average American household will spend nearly $2,000 on electricity this year, and the Energy Information Administration projects that number keeps climbing through at least 2030, driven by grid modernization costs and surging demand from data centers and electric vehicles. Your bill is not going down on its own, and the conventional fix, a standalone home battery, only solves half the problem. It stores your daytime solar for nighttime use, which is genuinely useful. But a single battery sitting alone in a single garage is still an island. When it's full and your panels are still producing, that extra energy has nowhere useful to go, even if your neighbor across the street is running his air conditioner at full blast at that exact moment. What if, instead of an island, your battery was part of a network? What if thousands of batteries across an entire state could act as one coordinated power plant whenever the grid actually needed help? That idea isn't hypothetical anymore. It's been running commercially for close to a decade, and it started with one of the most famous product launches in Silicon Valley history. On April 30th, 2015, Tesla held an event that had nothing to do with cars. Elon Musk walked on stage to unveil something the company had never sold before, a wall-mounted home battery called the Powerwall. At the time, Tesla was still primarily a car company trying to prove electric vehicles could be desirable, not just responsible. The Powerwall was a bet that the same battery technology powering the Model S could be repackaged to solve an entirely different problem, storing solar power at home instead of moving a car down the road. Chief Technology Officer J.B. Straubel, who had been quietly building out Tesla's stationary storage ambitions for years before that stage event, helped turn a battery pack designed for a car into a wall-mounted unit designed to sit in a garage for over a decade. The first Powerwall used nickel-manganese cobalt cells, the same general battery chemistry found in most EVs of that era, dense, powerful, but not necessarily built for the kind of daily repetitive cycling a home battery goes through year after year. Here's the chemistry difference that actually matters, and it's the same difference that separates a battery built to move a car fast from a battery built to sit on a wall for 15 years. Cobalt-based cells pack a huge amount of energy into a small, lightweight space, which is exactly what you want in a vehicle where every pound affects range. But that same chemistry is more prone to a phenomenon called thermal runaway, where a cell overheats and that heat cascades into neighboring cells. In a home battery, weight barely matters, but longevity and safety matter enormously because the thing is going to sit in your garage next to your car, cycling every single day for years. That's why, when Tesla launched the Powerwall 3 in September of 2023, it made a deliberate switch away from nickel manganese cobalt cells to lithium iron phosphate, the same LFP chemistry you'll find in other home batteries on the market today. LFP doesn't contain cobalt at all. It's dramatically more stable at high temperatures, and it holds up far better under the kind of daily full charge, full discharge cycling a home battery actually experiences. Tesla now backs the Powerwall 3 with a 10-year warranty guaranteeing at least 70% capacity retention, with unlimited cycles for standard solar self-consumption use. Real-world data collected from owner reports shows many units still retaining over 90% of their original capacity after 5 to 7 years of daily cycling, with average annual losses sitting somewhere around 1 to 3%, depending on usage and climate. But the battery chemistry, honestly, is only half the story. The real transformation happened when Tesla figured out how to connect thousands of these batteries together using software and turn them into something that behaves like an actual power plant. Every Powerwall ships with an intelligent energy management system that monitors your household's consumption, tracks your solar production, and decides in real time when to charge, when to discharge, and when to send power somewhere else entirely. That last part, sending power somewhere else, is what Tesla calls a virtual power plant, or VPP. In a traditional setup, your battery talks to your inverter talks to the grid, and that's the end of the conversation. In a Tesla VPP, your battery is quietly part of a much larger coordinated network, one that a utility can call on during a genuine grid emergency, drawing a controlled amount of stored power from thousands of homes simultaneously instead of firing up a natural gas peaker plant that sits idle 350 days a year. The homeowner gets paid for providing that service. The utility avoids building or running expensive backup generation it barely uses. And critically, Powerwall still prioritizes your own home's backup power first. It automatically charges to 100% ahead of a forecasted storm. And during a VPP event, it only ever discharges the amount you've pre-approved, so you're never left without a safety net. The place where this idea first proved itself at a massive scale wasn't actually a neighborhood full of Powerwalls. It was a single enormous battery in the middle of the Australian outback. In September of 2016, a once-in-50-year storm tore through South Australia's grid infrastructure and triggered a statewide blackout. The following year, in a now-famous exchange on Twitter, Musk publicly promised to install a 100-megawatt battery system within 100 days of the contracts being signed, or the entire thing would be free. South Australia's Premier, Jay Weatherill, took him up on it. Construction on what became the Hornsdale Power Reserve started in September of 2017, and the 100-megawatt, 129-megawatt-hour battery was completed and connected to the grid by December 1st, comfortably beating the deadline. In its first year alone, it saved the state roughly 40 million Australian dollars in grid service costs and stepped in within moments of a coal plant failure just 2 weeks after switching on, stabilizing the grid before most residents even noticed anything had gone wrong. By its second full year of operation, independent engineering analysis credited the battery with saving South Australian consumers over $150 million. In 2020, the Nair site was expanded by another 50 megawatts, bringing total capacity to 150 megawatts, and upgraded with what Tesla calls virtual machine mode, letting the battery mimic the physical inertia that traditional spinning turbines provide to keep a grid stable, something batteries had never been able to do commercially before. That project proved the concept at utility scale. The next phase was proving it could work with thousands of small residential batteries instead of one giant industrial one, and Puerto Rico became the place where that idea got tested under real pressure. After Hurricane Maria devastated the island's grid in 2017, Tesla shipped a wave of Powerwalls to the island. And years later, that installed base became the foundation for what may be the largest residential virtual power plant on Earth. As of the most recent public data, Tesla's Puerto Rico VPP includes over 63,000 participating Powerwall owners, capable of delivering up to 50 megawatts of power, enough to support around 200,000 homes during an emergency, according to Tesla's own Senior Director of Residential Energy. The Puerto Rico VPP is frequently what engineers call the marginal resource on the island, meaning without it, the utility would have no choice but to shed load and cut power to entire neighborhoods just to keep the grid from collapsing. Since June of this year alone, it's been activated 25 separate times to prevent exactly that outcome, with Powerwall customers collectively delivering around 80 megawatts for 4 straight hours during the island's most dangerous moments. Participants get paid roughly $1 for every kilowatt hour they contribute back to the grid during these events. California tells a similar story at an even larger scale. In July of 2025, Tesla's California VPP delivered more than 535 megawatts of capacity to the grid during a single coordinated dispatch, with Powerwall households alone contributing nearly 500 megawatts of that total, enough to power roughly half of San Francisco. That was, by Tesla's own account, the largest coordinated VPP dispatch in the company's history, moving over 1 gigawatt-hour of energy to the California grid operator in one event. And this year, Tesla pushed the model even further, launching a zero-down Powerwall lease program bundled with a retail electricity plan in Texas, joining a handful of other companies now competing to turn home batteries into the backbone of the grid itself. Across just 5 major markets, California, Texas, Puerto Rico, New England, and Australia, Tesla's coordinated VPP fleet now represents roughly 2.38 gigawatts of dispatchable capacity. To put that in perspective, that's comparable to 2 or 3 full-size natural gas power plants, except this one is scattered across 1 million individual garages, and it can respond to a grid emergency in seconds instead of hours. Here's the part of this story that doesn't show up in the keynote presentations, though, because getting here wasn't a clean, uncontroversial rise. In June of 2016, Tesla announced it would acquire SolarCity, a struggling solar installation company, for $2.6 billion in an all-stock deal. SolarCity had been co-founded by Musk's cousins, and Musk himself was its largest shareholder and chairman at the time, on top of being Tesla's CEO. Investors were skeptical from the moment the announcement dropped, and Tesla's stock fell more than 10% that day. Shareholders eventually sued, arguing the acquisition was really a disguised bailout of a company facing what internal emails later revealed Musk himself had called a liquidity crisis. Tesla's board members settled their portion of the lawsuit for $60 million in 2020 without admitting fault. Musk personally fought the case all the way through trial, facing a judgment that could have cost him upwards of $2 billion if he'd lost. In 2022, a Delaware judge ruled entirely in his favor, and in 2023, the state's Supreme Court upheld that ruling, finding the deal had been conducted at arm's length and was, in the court's words, entirely fair. The SolarCity acquisition is exactly where Tesla's solar and energy storage businesses fused together into what eventually became Tesla Energy, the division responsible for the Powerwall's expansion from a single product into an entire grid-scale ecosystem. And even the hardware itself hasn't been immune to setbacks. In September of 2025, Australia's consumer watchdog issued a recall for a batch of Powerwall 2 units after Tesla identified a defect in lithium-ion cells sourced from a third-party supplier, cells that in a small number of cases had overheated, smoked, or in a few instances caught fire and caused minor property damage. 2 months later, in November, that recall expanded to more than 10,500 Powerwall 2 units in the United States, after the Consumer Product Safety Commission logged 22 reports of overheating, including 5 actual fires. No injuries were reported in either country, and Tesla remotely discharged every affected unit it could reach as a precaution while arranging free replacements. Tesla has stated the defect doesn't affect the newer Powerwall 3, which uses a different LFP cell supply chain entirely. Still, with more than 1 million Powerwalls installed worldwide as of last year, the recalled units represent a small fraction of the total fleet, but it's a real reminder that even a decade-proven product isn't beyond the reach of a batch-specific manufacturing defect, and it's worth knowing about before you sign a contract. So, what does actually getting one of these look like today? The current model is the Powerwall 3, which integrates the battery, a hybrid inverter, and an automatic transfer switch into a single wall-mounted unit with a usable capacity of 13.5 kilowatt-hours. You can stack up to 4 expansion packs onto a single unit for a combined 54 kilowatt-hours if your household needs serious whole-home backup. Installed pricing typically runs in a similar range to other premium home battery systems, and the Federal Residential Clean Energy Credit currently offers a 30% tax credit on the full installed cost of a qualifying battery system, which meaningfully changes the math on a project like this. If you live in California, Texas, Puerto Rico, or parts of New England, enrolling in Tesla's VPP program can add real, ongoing income on top of those upfront savings, since you're effectively renting out a slice of your battery's capacity to the grid in exchange for compensation. If you're comparing the Powerwall against other batteries on the market, ask the installer 3 specific questions before you sign anything. First, what chemistry is actually inside the unit? And is it LFP or an older cobalt-based cell? Second, how many full cycles is the battery actually warranted for, not just how many years? And third, does this specific battery qualify for a virtual power plant program in your utility territory? Because that third question is the one that determines whether your battery is a passive backup device or an asset that's actually earning you money while it sits in your garage. Here's where this actually lands. The average American household will spend roughly $23,000 on electricity over the next 12 years without doing anything differently. A Powerwall paired with solar and VPP enrollment can meaningfully cut into that number with the exact savings depending on your state, your roof, and how aggressively your local utility has embraced these programs. In Puerto Rico, more than 63,000 homeowners are already getting paid to keep their island's grid from collapsing during emergencies. In South Australia, a single battery built in 100 days has saved consumers over $150 million and counting. And in California, half of San Francisco's worth of emergency power came from Powerwalls sitting quietly in people's garages, not from a power plant anyone had to build. The technology isn't experimental anymore. It's already running today at a scale most people have no idea exists. So here's the question I want you to answer in the comments. If your utility offered to pay you for letting them draw on your home battery during a genuine grid emergency, capped at a level you control, would you take that deal? Or would you rather keep every kilowatt hour fully to yourself, even if it means paying more for the privilege of total independence? There's no wrong answer here, but I think your response says a lot about how comfortable you are with your house quietly becoming part of something bigger than itself. And here's a number to sit with before you go. Tesla's coordinated VPP fleet across just 5 markets can now dispatch more power in an emergency than most mid-sized natural gas plants ever built. And it did it without pouring a single foundation or laying a mile of new transmission line. It's already sitting in garages. It just took the right software to turn a wall full of individual batteries into a power plant nobody had to build. Subscribing and sharing is the simplest way to make sure information like this keeps showing up in your feed instead of disappearing behind an algorithm that would rather sell you something you already own. And if you want to see what happens when an entire country bans new gas connections and mandates battery storage in every new home built from here on out, that video is coming next. Coming next. Coming next.